Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Esther Clark, and we are live here from the Drucker Forum in Vienna, this beautiful city of Vienna. And I have the absolute pleasure this afternoon to speak to you and to Behnam Tabrizi about his new book, Going on Offense. And it's a huge, huge pleasure for me to be here and to be talking to you for a little bit. We're going to give the audience a taste of what this book is about.
Awesome.
It's been on sale at the bookstore here. I've
Yes.
seen people buying up some copies and probably at their nearest bookseller as well. But I guess, you know, I went to your panel discussion yesterday. It was really, really interesting. I've also read the book. So I have a few questions here prepared.
By all means.
And I think the audience will be super interested in what this book's all about. So you've been teaching for many years at Stanford University. I think most people know your name. So we're going to focus in on the book itself. So the book, it's called Going on Offense, a Leader's Playbook for Perpetual Innovation. What is perpetual innovation?
Well, the idea of the book, after I wrote two major books, one was about personal transformation.
Right.
And the other one was about rapid transformation, is how to organizational rapidly transform.
Right.
I thought I had the answer to transformation until there was a dinner.
Yeah.
And we had, we had invited Hans Westberger, who was the CEO of Ericsson at the time, and
Right.
now he is the chairman of Verizon. And he sent a lot of his executives to Stanford, and he was a tough customer, so they asked me to sit down and have dinner with him. We were having wine, and I say, Hans, why did you send your people to Stanford?
Yeah.
And then he looks at me and he says, I want them to really learn about the secret code of Silicon Valley. And I was like, oh. So that night I couldn't sleep, Esther. I was like, I thought I had all the answers, but living in Silicon Valley for, I don't know, over 30 years,
Yeah.
I never really studied what the secret sauce and secret code, the Da Vinci Code
Yeah.
of Silicon Valley is.
Yeah.
So that started,
Yeah.
2015, 16, I started and did a survey of over 6,000 academics, industry executive, consumers, so decided what the top innovative organizations are. And almost all of them were either in Silicon Valley or in Seattle, if you will. Microsoft and Amazon also made it. And to my surprise, two companies, Google and Facebook, did not make it in terms of being a perpetual innovator. That means
Right.
constantly innovate. That means it's not just the first innovation that gets you to scale and gets you to go to public, but you constantly innovate. A
Right.
great example is Amazon.
Right.
Right? They were a B2C selling books. Then they were pioneer of cloud, which was one of the largest, and now they're doing so well in other things such as Kindle and such as AI and so forth. So I studied Amazon, I studied Apple, I studied Tesla, Microsoft, Amazon, but I also got to study Starbucks because I wanted a non-tech company.
Right.
And Starbucks also has a history of perpetual innovation.
Yeah.
And I spoke to over a dozen people,
Right.
former and current top executives, employees. Some of them were my students.
Yeah.
And what I also loved is, in high tech, people move around. So they were like someone who worked in Amazon and also worked in Google, so I can compare and contrast. But I also studied companies that did not do well, such as Nokia, such as Blockbuster, and Borders and so forth. So because you have to study all of these. So every chapter is full of stories about these companies based on my study, based on having a front seat, but also stories of organizations that didn't do well. And by the way, big surprise, not every Silicon Valley company made the list. Two companies that did not make a list was Google and Facebook.
Really interesting.
And Google has spent so much money, as your audience knows, in moonshot projects. None of them has really come to fruition. So these two organizations did not make it. So it was just for me, it was just so exciting to do this work.
Yeah. Well, I think what I really enjoyed about the book is that it's based on like case studies and real world examples. And
there's no like major theory or, academics are known to do theory. I wanted this to be applied. I wanted this to be a cookbook, a playbook, so that you can actually, 95% of companies are not like this, right?
Yeah.
You can look at this
Yeah.
and you can say, I want to be 10% better on this.
Right.
I want to do this. I want to do that. These are mindsets that I want them to adopt, and then re-architecture it for their environment and their culture. I think that's really the key word.
Yeah. And I mean, the first part of the book, you use a really interesting word, which is generous.
Yes.
And so, setting your purpose and what does your company, what does it do? Why does it matter?
Yes.
And I think that's really interesting. But why generous? Where did that come from?
Well, I came up with 8 key mindsets that these organizations have, because
Right.
I didn't want this to be just one company, but
Yeah.
all these key organizations.
Yeah.
And then I wondered if there are three archetypes within these 8.
Right.
And then one, I thought it was basically generous, and I describe in the book, as you said. And by the way, it's clear that you read the book really well.
I love your book.
And the first part of generosity is what I call existential purpose. I devote a chapter on existential purpose. And a lot of organizations pay lip service to mission. This is not about this.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, Tesla's existential purpose is to accelerate the world transition to sustainable energy. Just
Right.
imagine, the world transition. They
Yeah.
don't say Tesla's transition, they say
No.
the world transition.
No,
So
no.
what do? They open source their patent, right? Everybody could have our patents.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're board of director, you say, what the heck are you guys doing? They're going to steal our patents and they're going to catch up. And, Tesla would say, no. We just have to increase the rate of our innovation.
Exactly.
And per employee, we need to innovate more. Per year, we need to
Yeah.
innovate. And they have been.
Yeah.
So every time they add 51 parts, they take out 50 parts.
Yeah.
And they constantly push the edges
Yeah.
on innovation
Yeah.
and so on. So in some ways, he increases tempo. Another key thing about generosity is they're generous toward their customer.
Right.
They're obsessed about their customer. Apple, I just love their customer service. Every time. The other day I was in Lisbon, I lost my laptop. I completely freaked out, if you will. Normal, right? Because these things are like our life.
Yeah.
And I have everything there. Called, second ring, they answered, and they wiped out everything from my laptop. I mean, this is really the
Yeah.
obsession about customer.
Yeah.
And the third thing is they're obsessed about making sure that they develop their employees.
Right.
And they inculcate the values
Yeah.
of the founder
Yeah.
throughout the organization.
Yeah.
And that's generosity.
Yes, and you used you used Pygmalion in there, the sculpture Pygmalion. Sorry, but that's really cool. What's that about?
Pygmalion, it was the Greek sculpture.
Yes.
And it's a mythology. And basically, he couldn't find a date, he couldn't find a suitable lover, so he decided to sculpt this, sculpture of this beautiful woman, his
Yes.
dream woman,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So he went out and tried to do some errands, come back, and she was alive. And they were happily married ever and after.
Yes,
And
yes.
there is a very interesting article in HBR called, old article, Pygmalion in Management. And it's really about how do you multiply your values across the
Right,
organization.
yeah.
So that's why I use the word Pygmalion. Let me just give you a story about this, because people love stories. Steve Jobs calls this gentleman, Ron Johnson, who's a friend of mine, and he was the first person who actually endorsed the book. Ron Johnson was in charge of the entire Apple store, which almost every pundit thought this is not going to work because the others haven't worked.
Yeah.
Per square meter, I'm going to use meter because we're here in Europe,
Yes.
per square meter, the highest selling store in the world. And so Ron Johnson was new. 7 p.m. at night, Steve Jobs calls him. Ron, I need to talk to you. First day, Ron says, Steve, I have 2 young kids. I need to take care of them, Steve says, Ron, when do you sleep? I sleep, when do they sleep, sorry? When do they sleep? So they sleep at 9 p.m. Okay, I'll call you at 9. 9:15, he calls him. He calls him for 3 months, Esther. And then during this conversation, he says, Ron, there are about half a dozen people in Apple that I want to get really close with. And I want you to understand how I think. Because once you understand how I think, I don't need to talk to you very much because I know you carry these values.
Yeah.
And that's what Pygmalion is.
Yeah,
and Ron did the
beautiful.
same thing with his people.
Beautiful. No, I love that. And I think the audience that will really resonate with them as well.
Thank you.
We are running out of time. So I wanted to
I'm
ask
just getting
this question.
started.
I know. But we can continue the discussion.
Sure.
There's a great amount of discussion here at the Drucker Forum. One little pearl of wisdom, perhaps for the younger generation. We saw the Drucker Challenge winners yesterday.
Yes.
The Drucker laureates.
Yes.
One pearl of wisdom you'd like to leave to them today.
Well, by the way, they are my favorite. And after this discussion, they wanted to meet with me. I met with them, and I'm going to spend 1 hour with all these young
Beautiful.
winners. And so what I'm actually going to do with them, and it's basically, there was this lady, very smart lady, Cameron, who read my book. And I told Cameron, who was part of my publisher, I said, Cameron, people have read this book, copyrighted twice. You're not going to find any errors. Cameron found like 6 errors.
Right.
And 3 paragraphs that were repeated. And I was just like, wow. If anybody knows my book, it's Cameron. So I called Cameron, and she lives, she's a gig worker. She lives in north of France. I said, Cameron, how did you like the book? Because I thought this person really read the book. And she said, the lessons are also great for individuals. So basically, what I'm going to do with the students is basically say, let's talk about existential purpose.
Yes.
What is your mission in
Beautiful.
life? Who are your customers? Is your family?
Yeah.
Is your loved one? Is your best friends?
Yeah.
How are you going to be connected to
Right.
them? How are you going to? You guys are now leaders in your organization, in your group. When you go back to Brazil, when you go back to India, how are you going to develop other young people?
Yeah.
People who are maybe 11, 12,
Yes.
who are suffering from problems and
Yes.
challenges.
Yes.
And then, how are you going to increase the tempo of what we're trying to do? How
Yeah.
can you? And this is one. I'm going to leave with the last point.
Yes.
I devote a chapter about boldness and being courageous. And I'm going to ask them, how can you even be bolder and be more courageous? And the best way to deal with boldness and courageous is to deal with fear.
Right. Amazing. On that note, I would like to thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for the audience for tuning into Drucker Forum TV. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Esther. Appreciate it.